They expected your fall. They watched from the shadows, whispering predictions over your life like dark prayers. They counted your mistakes before you even made them. They measured your strength with their limited vision and concluded, it won't last. They thought the pressure would crush you. They thought the betrayal would silence you. They thought the loneliness would hollow you out. They were wrong. But in the beginning, even you weren't sure. Because when the storm first hit, it didn't feel like a lesson. It felt like an ending. The ground beneath your feet cracked. The voices you trusted turned cold. The doors you knocked on stayed shut. And the people who once clapped for you, they stepped back, quietly, carefully, waiting for your fall. They expected you to crumble under the weight of disappointment. They expected you to question yourself so deeply that you would never rise again. They thought if they removed their support, you would collapse. But what they didn't understand is this: pressure doesn't always break a diamond. Sometimes it reveals it. Expectation versus reality. They had a picture in their minds of how this story would end. You, exhausted. You, defeated. You, apologizing for dreaming too loudly. They expected tears without recovery. They expected silence without comeback. They expected you to shrink, but instead, something strange happened. You didn't break. You bent. You didn't shatter. You sharpened. When they withdrew their love, you discovered self-respect. When they withheld validation, you built self-belief. When they tried to isolate you, you found your own voice echoing louder in the empty room. And that confused them, because they expected your fall. They didn't expect your awakening. They thought pain would poison you, but pain purified you. Every insult became fuel. Every rejection became redirection. Every lonely night became a conversation with your higher self. While they were betting against you, you were building in silence. Do you understand how powerful that is? They saw your struggle and assumed weakness. You felt your struggle and discovered strength. They thought you were drowning, but you were learning how to breathe underwater. Transformation, Phase 1, the fire that forged you. It didn't happen overnight, let's be honest. There were nights when you stared at the ceiling, replaying their words like a broken record. There were mornings when your reflection looked unfamiliar. There were moments when doubt wrapped around your chest like chains. But here's the difference. You didn't run from the fire. You walked into it. You allowed the discomfort to teach you. You allowed the silence to stretch you. You allowed the pain to carve depth into your spirit. Because somewhere in the chaos, you realized something. They only had power over the version of you that needed their approval. And that version, you buried it. You started waking up earlier, not just from sleep, but from illusion. You started seeing people for who they were, not who you hoped they would be. You stopped explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. That was the first transformation. Not louder, not angrier, just clearer. You became intentional. While they were gossiping, you were growing. While they were doubting, you were developing discipline. While they were waiting for your collapse, you were constructing foundations they couldn't see. Picture this, a phoenix surrounded by flames. Outsiders see destruction, but inside the fire, something sacred is happening. Feathers turning to ash, ash turning to power, power turning to flight. That was you. They saw smoke, you felt rebirth, and slowly, subtly, power began shifting. Conflict reaction when they realized you weren't breaking. At first, they were patient. They thought, just give it time. They believed the pressure would eventually wear you down. They thought consistency wasn't in you. They assumed your confidence was temporary. But time passed, and you were still standing, stronger, quieter, more focused. And that's when confusion turned into discomfort. Why isn't it working? They wondered. Why didn't the rumors ruin you? Why didn't the rejection stop you? Why didn't the loneliness make you desperate? Did they really think you would stay broken? They underestimated what solitude can do to a person who refuses to quit. Solitude sharpened your mind. Silence strengthened your intuition. Isolation forced you to become self-sufficient, and self-sufficient people are dangerous because they don't beg, they don't chase, they don't collapse when support disappears. They build. That's when fear crept into their eyes. They started watching you differently, not with pity, but with suspicion, because your glow wasn't fading, it was intensifying. They expected your fall, but they were witnessing your rise. And here's the part that unsettled them the most. You weren't angry anymore. You weren't trying to prove anything. You simply moved forward, unbothered, calm, certain. Do you know how powerful that is? When your peace becomes louder than their noise, when your discipline becomes stronger than their doubt, when your silence becomes more threatening than any argument, that's when the power fully shifts. Transformation, Phase 2, the crown in the storm. There comes a moment in every transformation when survival turns into mastery. You reached that moment. You stopped reacting. You started responding. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" you began asking, "What is this preparing me for?" And that question changed everything. The storms didn't stop, but you learned how to walk through rain without rushing for shelter. The criticism didn't disappear, but you stopped letting it define your reflection. The memories didn't vanish, but they lost their control over your future. You became the calm in your own chaos. Imagine standing on a battlefield after the war, smoke rising, debris scattered, silence heavy, and there you are, not untouched, but unbroken. Scars across your spirit like medals of honor. They expected your fall, but they never imagined you would wear your scars like a crown, because you realized something powerful. Revenge is noisy. Mastery is silent. You didn't need to expose them. You didn't need to confront them. You didn't need to compete. Your growth spoke. Your consistency spoke. Your peace screamed. And every time you chose discipline over drama, every time you chose healing over hatred, every time you chose progress over pettiness, you won again and again and again. Did they think resilience had an expiration date? Did they assume your spirit was fragile? No. What they truly feared was this. What if the very pain they caused becomes the reason you surpass them? And that's exactly what happened. You turned rejection into redirection. You turned betrayal into boundaries. You turned loneliness into leadership. You stopped seeking validation from the same people who doubted your vision. Instead, you validated yourself. That is transformation. Not loud, not flashy, but undeniable. Mini climax, the moment you realized your power. There was a day, maybe you remember it. A quiet realization. You looked around and noticed something strange. You were no longer chasing. You were attracting. You were no longer reacting. You were choosing. You were no longer asking for space at the table. You were building your own. And in that moment, something clicked. They expected your fall. But now, they were watching your expansion. You felt it in your posture, in your voice, in the way you walked into rooms without shrinking. You weren't trying to intimidate anyone, but your presence carried weight, because pain had refined you, because discipline had shaped you, because self-respect had anchored you. And here's the truth. The version of you they tried to break no longer exists. That person who needed their approval, gone. That person who tolerated disrespect, gone. That person who feared being alone, gone. In their place stands someone steady, someone focused, someone unstoppable. Empowerment climax, the rise they never saw coming. Now look at you, still here, still rising, still building. They expected your fall. Instead, they witnessed evolution. You didn't collapse under pressure. You converted it into power. You didn't lose yourself in betrayal. You found yourself in solitude. You didn't shrink when support disappeared. You discovered independence. And now you don't move to impress them. You move with purpose. You don't seek revenge. You seek excellence. You don't argue with critics. You outgrow them. That's the ultimate victory. Not proving them wrong, but proving yourself right. And here's what they never understood. Your strength was never dependent on their belief. Your destiny was never controlled by their doubt. Your value was never determined by their opinions. They expected your fall because they measured you with their limitations. But you chose expansion, you chose growth, you chose resilience, and resilience always wins in the long run. Always.